Hi, Shelby Joe Long here with the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast. I have the great privilege of listening to stories to inspire you to think about your expertise in a different way. Because the people I interview are those that have transformed their genius, their expertise into an income stream. They're living a life of their passion, and they are here to influence you to think about your expertise differently. Today, I'm excited to learn more about Kelly's background. Kelly, I'm going to let her pronounce her last name, is the CEO of 2 Mile High Marketing, and I'm excited to hear more about her story. So, Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shelby. So it's Kelly Schuknecht, and I like it when people actually try to say it, and then I get to make a joke about it. But you just played it safe.
Did play it safe. Well, because I asked you the other day, and I was like, I just don't want to embarrass myself and mess it up again. So,
Yeah,
yes, I played it
it's
safe.
not
I
an
like it.
easy one.
And as people will see in the show notes, and in the title, it's a, it's a handle. So yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's
Kelly,
a
tell us about
good.
it's what?
I was gonna say it's a good, strong German name.
A good, strong German name.
Yes, yes.
It definitely looks like it. So, well, Kelly, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned 2 Mile High Marketing. I like to explain where that name came from. So you hear of Denver as the Mile High City. I live in the mountains of Colorado where we actually are at 2 miles high, so 10,200 feet, twice as high as Denver. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Now I feel like I have to explain that I'm not a cannabis marketing business, but
I, I was gonna say it, but I'm like, you probably heard it before.
I beat you to it. No, but anyways, I so I started my business last year. I was laid off in October and kind of spent some time thinking about what I wanted to do next. I had had a little bit of a warning. Like I for a couple of years I knew that that was probably coming because my company had been acquired. And it was a 5-year transition for the acquisition. And so I thought I had a couple more years left before I would lose my job, but I kind of knew it was coming. And for the first couple of years of that merger, as it was happening, and I was starting to think about what I was going to do next, I dreamt up my company. I had created the website. I had come up with the name. I kind of had an idea of the services we were going to provide, although that has kind of evolved now that I'm actually doing it. Uh, and I had like sat on that for a long time, just kind of like, okay, like this is what I'm going to do next when it happens, right? And no real effort to like starting the company. I couldn't put myself out there. I couldn't advertise anything. I still had a job, right? And so I was trying to figure out like, how do you do this? How do you go out on your own when you can't really tell people that you're doing it? But then my problem was solved when I got laid off. And then I went, okay, like now it's time to either continue looking for jobs where I would be, I like to say, the person behind the person, or really take this opportunity to start the company that I had been thinking about for a couple years. And it took me about 24 to 48 hours to decide I was going all in on this company. And I say that because I told my husband, like right away, I was like, I'm going to just apply for jobs all day, every day, and then I'll work on my business on the side. And then that lasted about 24 hours. And then I was like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna do this. So yeah, so I started my company. A lot of that had to do with talking with a lot of people early on and just getting my head around really what direction I wanted to go. I had worked in marketing for 10, 15 years, and I knew that I could offer fractional CMO services, but I didn't feel pulled in that direction. So that was originally what I thought I was going to do, but I decided instead to focus on a very specific area that I had experience with And I like to just summarize that by saying thought leadership marketing. So, what I had done in my previous job was basically elevated my boss as a thought leader in his industry, right? And I had built a team, and we all supported him in getting podcast interviews, getting speaking events. We were developing materials for lead magnets when he would go to the events. We were doing all those things to really support his thought leadership and kind of help him be seen as that person. And I had one conversation with somebody early on who was like, "You probably don't know what you want to do in your business yet." And I was like, "No, I want to do this." And I explained that to him, and he was like, "You need to do that. Nobody's doing that." And I was like, "Then I'm going to do it." And I started it kind of with this idea of like, "Oh, I'll just, try it out." And it really took off fast because I think there's a lot of people out there who want to, there's a lot of business owners out there who want to establish their thought leadership platform. They know they need to go out and speak. They know that the more exposure they get, the more opportunities it turns into, but they just don't have the time, or they don't have the people on their team who have that expertise, or, who are specialized in that type of marketing. And so, yeah, so it's really taken off very fast. And, it has just become kind of taken on a life of its own, which has been fun. It's been a fun journey.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that. Like, what were some of the surprises to you? Because entrepreneurship is not, it's not for the faint of heart, as you well know. I mean, it's something that, when you're working for yourself and you're calling the shots, often coming up with that niche or the vision of who you want to work with and what problem you want to solve is the primary focus, and is the problem of a lot of people there, because they want to get people in first. But you started from that. So what became the biggest challenges in that space when you went from working for one person to working with many?
Yeah. Well, I would say, one of the things another person told me earlier on, like I said, when I first lost my job, I was talking to everyone. So, and that would be my first word of advice for anyone who loses their job and doesn't know what they're doing next. Book as many calls with as many people as you can, because every one of those conversations helped me gain clarity. And often the clarity came from people telling me what not to do. That was
Yeah.
interesting. So, somebody would tell me, you're in this one situation, somebody told me, "You don't want to build a team. Like building a team just means that you're at some point you're going to have to cut people, you're going to have to manage people, manage, payroll, things like that." And I was like, no, actually, that's exactly what I want to do, because that's what I had been good at, was building a team that worked really well together, and equipping people to do their parts of the puzzle, and the puzzle as a whole is serving the clients, right? So I started doing that, and I started investing in people to be on my team before I could pay myself, because I knew that getting the work done was going to be the most important thing. So it's like, yeah, I could pay myself, but if I can't serve the clients, then we're not going to go very far, right? But if I can get a foundation in place where the people who are working for me are handling a lot of the client work behind the scenes, it allows me then to bring in clients, to work on the business, to focus on those client relationships. And so I was doing that, and that helped us grow really fast. So I was able to kind of segment all the things that we were doing for the client, and then train people to do those specific pieces of the work for the client. And I think that is, while we were kind of working with one person in my job when I was an employee, we actually had multiple people in the company we were supporting in their thought leadership roles. So it really was very, in my mind, very replicatable. Is that a word?
Yeah,
It was
it is
easy to
now.
replicate that. Yeah. Because we were doing that. So you just figure out a way where you can systemize it, where it's like you're working on certain things, certain times of the day or certain days of the week, and pulling everything together for the clients within the time frame that you're giving them. So that part, was fairly easy for us. I would say the biggest challenge was really just the envisioning the work, going from working in a corporate environment like I was, where a lot of your work is just what's coming at you, right? It's like this person needs that, this person needs that. I have this meeting, and you're just kind of your day becomes just like whatever has to happen. But when I started a company, it was then like, okay, how are we going to deliver this service and make the most use of everyone's time every day? Like it's just a different way of looking at your day and your workflow than when we were in a corporate environment. I don't know. It was just that for me was an adjustment. It was like every day I sat down, I was like, huh, my job is whatever I am deciding that it is today. So what am I going to make it, right? And then just making conscious decisions every day to be productive with that time and to move things forward and to prioritize what made sense. So I just did a post today on LinkedIn about the fact that you don't have to have everything perfect right off the bat. Like when you're starting a company, a lot of people I think overthink and they want, everything has to be, yeah, I have to have the website, I have to have, the social media pages, I have to have the flyers, like whatever, all the things that they think that they need to have in place. And really, for me, those first few months was about sales, bringing in business, systemizing things, preparing the team, whatever. The one thing that kept falling on the back burner was a website. I had no website that actually said what we did. And I was like, I can't, I went into one meeting with somebody and she was like, oh, your website really doesn't say anything about you. I was like, yeah, I know, because I can't, like, that's the least of my concerns right now. But this week we updated the website. So now my website actually does say what we do, which, it's like, okay, that can come later and that's okay. But I think you have to really pick and choose your priorities and focus your time on the things that are going to help you grow your business. In my case, I needed it to be as soon as possible, right? I needed it to be as quick as possible. So I had to prioritize those things first.
Yeah. But it's hard to figure out what to prioritize, particularly after you've been working for somebody for a while. It's hard to do that. And spending
Sure.
your time, I mean, I think that's a challenge that I hear from a lot of genius entrepreneurs, people that are starting their own business or stepping into consulting. And it's like, yeah, you're recognized as it takes it takes a lot to be recognized as a speaker and as a thought leader. It takes a lot of work to do that. It's not something that happens overnight. And so it's something that builds over time, and it's something that you have to make a conscious effort to do. And if you're not doing it, you're not going to be just immediately seen as a thought leader and be picked up to
Right.
speak. I I
Right.
we work in the similar space. Like I work with a lot of speakers and
Yep.
trying to get their gigs and whatever, and it's like it's hard to be recognized because there's people that are doing the same thing and there's people that are doing more of it and probably better than you. And so it's spending that time strategically to be able to get in front of the right people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that some industries or some kind of topics are better than others. So, when my clients have like a really specific niche, it's easier for me to find those opportunities that are a good fit for them. Where like, for example, right now, AI is a topic that is blowing up. I have a lot of clients that want to speak on AI topics, but it's harder to get into those circles. A lot of them are pay to play. So
Yep.
you have to invest to go speak at their event. And my clients don't want to do that, right? But it's also just it doesn't make them unique right now because there's a lot of people who are speaking on that topic, unless their angle on it is unique. And that's something that, anyone wanting to go out and speak really has to look for those opportunities that make them stand out and not just look like anyone who could talk about leadership, for example, or, whatever those like big topics are that people want to speak on. What makes you different? That's been the most challenging, is if the topic or the person for whatever reason doesn't stand out, then we really have to look for ways to make them stand out.
Right. And that's gets into the brand. I love the brand talk, the brand strategy. And you got to be vulnerable. You got to share your story. You've got to share those things, whether it's online or on video or all of that. It's got to be all of the above if you want to really stand out. So it's trying to decide what the right move is. So for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a puzzle piece, like fitting all the puzzle pieces together to make the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why we have our speaker elevation plan. And when I first came up with that, it was actually somebody who had reached out back in November saying, is there anyone that can help find speaking events? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. Right. Like I was just starting my business. I was like, I'm not exactly sure where we're going yet, but like, yeah, I can help with that. Well, then I created a package that was, helping them find speaking events, helping them get podcast interviews, and helping them with their LinkedIn posting. Because a lot of, again, business owners are just busy, right? And so they end up being inconsistent with their LinkedIn posting. But in my mind, those things all go together. You're on podcasts, that helps prepare or helps give you some content to share. So the podcast host will share the link with you when the episode comes out. You can share that. You can also create clips from it. You can create quotes from it. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with a podcast interview.
Yeah.
So that's a part of the content strategy. And then all of that then supports if a speaking event is looking at that person to see if they'll be a good fit for their event, they can see that, oh, look, this person talks on this topic all the time. They have a regular presence on LinkedIn. They're engaging. Those things all help make an impression about the person. So I wanted to kind of make it this all-encompassing thing and not just one area or another. I know there's a lot of companies out there, for example, that do executive posting on LinkedIn, right? So they'll do your LinkedIn posting, and that's great. I mean, that's great to have, but I just think if you really want to get out there and speak and become known for something, you have to look at it from like a more holistic, I think, approach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you talked about how you're in the marketing space, you talked about how the kind of super niche and the more that you stand out. Can you talk about that, something specific like that, about to maybe help our audience think a little bit differently about how they're presenting themselves online or how they're
Yeah.
speaking
So
about things?
yeah, the example when I was saying that, we have a client that they are a WordPress development company. So that to me it makes them very easy to look for events specifically, right? Because it's WordPress, it's developer events that, I mean, to me, those are just easier to find a very specific thing. Whereas we had another client, we've gotten this person kind of like honed in on some topics and event types to look for. But, at first he was like, I can speak at anything on any topic, right? And we're like, great, but like, what makes you like the best for certain events or whatever? And we came up with 3 or 4 presentation briefs for him that are like, here's the topic, here's what you would talk about at this event, and then we really just focus on those 3 or 4 things when we're reaching out to events instead of looking at everyone. Like the other side of it is like you're reinventing the wheel for every event. If you're like, I could at this one I could talk about leadership, at this one I could talk about AI, at this one I could talk about team building, like whatever, it's like, yes, you can, but like, let's really try to become known for something specifically. And that just takes really being intentional around it and saying like, okay, this is the thing I want people to know me for. I mean, even myself, I can look at, all of the experience I've had in my 20 plus year career. There's lots of things I could talk about, but what makes me unique? And I think I've seen that the most in starting my business was that's where I really stood out, was when I really started tapping into my uniqueness and what makes me stand out, what makes me, like, what people think about me when they're thinking about me, right? Like what comes to mind. And those are the things you really want to focus on and build on because you already have that presence. A lot of people are like, what would I even talk about? What would I write a book about? I guarantee there are things that people associate you with that you may not realize because you take it for granted. But if you start paying attention to that and leaning into it, it's going to open up more doors for you, that you wouldn't have realized. So so going back to your question about an example, I mean, so that was an example we had with him where we really helped him get focused on what that messaging would look like. We actually just booked him his first event last week, so that was really exciting. And, it just helped us really focus in our efforts to get him those events that would make the most sense for him. Sometimes, and I don't know how it is for your clients, Shelby, but we have clients all over the place. Some just want to speak. Like they're not necessarily trying to get anything out of it. They just want to speak. Others are trying to get clients out of speaking. Others are trying to get paid out of speaking. So people have different goals. And so really, looking at what is that goal and what is that going to bring you? And even if it's just experience, great, but like then we still want to lean into like what makes the most sense, like what do you have to teach people, and that would be the most useful to people. So yeah, so we just kind of help people get that clarity, help them define their topics, and then help them get out there.
It's all of this discussion is so, I mean, that's it's key for your brand, and it's key to be recognized, and it's all key, particularly in the speaking space, but in content and just you as a business to differentiate you. And there's thousands of businesses out there, and there's thousands of messages out on social media. So how do you stand out? What makes you different? And that's, I think it's your genius. And that's what your genius offer is, and what makes you unique. And I think that's in your story and in your experience and your background and what everything that you just talked about, and embracing that. And I think for, you even talked about it too, when you kind of stepped into entrepreneurship and how hard it is to, because the focus of the business is you, and how to be
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable enough to open yourself to that story and to let that story dictate the relationship. And sometimes you hear no's, and that's hard, because if you're being open and vulnerable and having these conversations and then people say, not today, then you're like, geez, what does that do if you are the center of your brand? But that's the way that you stand out, and that's the way you do that. So it's hard.
Right.
It's a hard space to be in. You almost become
Yeah.
a life coach too. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the hardest thing for me is I've always, I think I mentioned it earlier, like if I've always seen myself as the person behind the person. I've always worked for that CEO who was the visionary, who had all the ideas, and then I was the one who was making it happen, right? So it was, they could say like, okay, we're gonna do this. We want to, launch this new program, or, we want to make this many millions of dollars this year, whatever, right? And then I was behind the scenes, like making all that stuff happen, and that was great. I mean, that I felt accomplished in my role doing that. But when I decided to start this, I knew that I needed to kind of embrace being that person in the spotlight. And Shelby, because I have talked many times now that it's not easy for me. Like it is not easy for me. And I really have to push myself. And right now I'm going through multiple speaking courses and pushing myself to do it because um, it just does not come natural for me.
yeah.
But in the role that I'm now in, because like this company has like I said, it's taken on a life of its own. It's become a real thing, right? And so it's like, okay, I have to put myself in that position now where I am accepting being in the spotlight and accepting people looking at me, and just embrace it. And I'm not there yet. I'm getting there, but it's challenging.
It takes time. It takes time, but it's also, I don't know, I think that's an important lesson too for potential entrepreneurs out there, is that it's not easy. We've got to do uncomfortable things, and we don't want to be in the spotlight, and don't want to have all the eyes on us, and don't want to be the differentiated thought leader. But that's the uncomfortable piece about it, if that's not your personality or whatever, because it's not every CEO's personality to be able to do that. And so it's
Right.
stepping into that uncomfortable space, but it's a way that you're building your business. And it's also you stepping into the shoes that you want them to step into. You know what I mean? Like if
Hmm.
you've done it, then adds to your credibility and all that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps position me in my role, right? And yeah, so I'm very aware of that. I've been pushing myself since the beginning. I really don't think I would have done any of this if I hadn't been pushing myself actually before I went out on my own. I recognized, so I read the book Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I don't remember when, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I knew when I read that book that I had to push myself to speak. Like it was something I read in that book where it was like, basically, we tell ourselves, I'm not that person. That's not my personality. I don't do things like that. Whatever. We have those things that we tell ourselves. And his purpose in that book is to help us understand that, like, that we're limiting ourselves, that is not a limit that's put on us by our personality or who we are, or we're putting those limits on ourselves. And so after I read that book, I started pushing myself to do videos online, and I did some podcast interviews. I started doing TikTok videos. I started doing YouTube videos. Started pushing myself to do some webinars online, things like that, because I knew that the next phase of my career was going to it was going to be necessary for me to be more out there. I didn't know what that next phase of my career was going to be, but I just knew that if I wanted to grow in my career, I had to push myself in that way. And I'm so grateful that I did that for several years before losing my job, because I just kind of had a presence online that I had built, and I had put, and people would say to me, "You're so natural in your videos." I'm like, "Oh, that does not feel natural at all." But I have everyone fooled. So that's all that matters. But
All
really
that matters.
doing it just makes you feel more comfortable with it. And so, it's just like whatever that thing is that you're telling yourself, "Oh, I'm not that person. I can't do that." Like that's what I always say is like, just force yourself to do more of those things, because you never know like how that's going to help you grow in the future.
And unless you say it, unless you write it, unless you get it out there, nobody knows it, right? So you be in obscurity. Can you talk a little bit about how important an online presence is, and particularly on LinkedIn, for thought leaders and CEOs and business owners that want to be known?
Yeah. So we do, I had mentioned we do the LinkedIn posting for business owners, for our clients. Um, you know, we have one client, not an ongoing client, but someone we had done the workshop with, who she is like a total Instagram business owner. She does those Instagram videos. She does a great job. And I asked her, "Why are you not doing that? Why are you not sharing these on LinkedIn? It's basically the same content. You could just take it and post it on LinkedIn." She's like, "I hate LinkedIn." And I was like, "Okay, but like you're in professional services, and I think that that would be a really good, I think that that's a good platform for you to focus on. There's a lot of professionals on there. It just helps remind people who you are, that you exist, or what you're doing. And so she did. She posted one of her videos on LinkedIn between when we did the workshop and when we reported her marketing plan back to her, and got a lead from one of those videos that she shared. And I was like, see, it's a
Yeah.
good place. You're not always just going to get leads flowing your way through LinkedIn, but it's a reminder that you exist. That's what I always think of it. It's you may not get something right that moment when you post something. You may not even know, if you're not getting much engagement, you may not even know that people are seeing it. But over time, you're starting to leave an impression in their minds about who you are, what you do, how you might be able to help them. And you never know what sort of connections those can lead to, as far as somebody thinking of you and something comes up and connecting you with somebody else who needs your service, or, the person themselves at some point maybe reaches out to you. Again, I just think it's a it's a pretty small lift to remind people that you exist, show them your personality, and convert people over time. Again, your expectations need to be low. It's not going to convert people immediately all the time, but it is just kind of a slow roll that you're constantly reminding people of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, what advice would you give to yourself a year ago? Or that person that's thinking about maybe leaving their job or starting their own business or doing something? What advice would you give to them to
Well, for anyone thinking about possibly leaving their job, starting their own business, my recommendation is, like I said, about, what I did putting myself out there. If you have any idea in your brain that you might want to start a business someday, start pushing yourself to create content online, to post that content on LinkedIn. I was doing that, like I said, for years up until I lost my job. And then when I announced on LinkedIn that I had started a company, I had all kinds of people reaching out to me because I had a regular presence there and I wasn't asking for anything. I was just telling them the update on my job situation, but people were interested. So be posting strategically at least a couple times a week on LinkedIn if you have any inclination that you might do that someday. And the advice I would give to myself a year ago is you deserve to be in the spotlight too. I really, a year ago, did not see myself as that person, even though I had this thought I wanted to start a business. I just always thought that spotlight was for someone else. And when I finally started my business and made it official and started actually running a company, I realized that I had capabilities inside of me that I did not know existed. And I don't think anyone would have ever told me like you'd be a great business owner. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't know that. And yet when I started it, I felt like I was thriving in a way that I never felt as an employee anywhere. And I told somebody I was talking with shortly after starting my company, I was like, I feel like myself for the first time in my entire career. And that to me was just such a freeing feeling. And I mean, everything happened the way it was supposed to, Shelby. So, like, I don't go back and regret anything, but I wish I would have trusted myself to do this a year ago on my own terms rather than when it was kind of forced on me to make the decision. I realize now that I could have done it, but back then I didn't believe in myself enough. So that would be my advice. Believe in yourself. You can do it. If you have that desire within you, find a way to make it happen.
I think that's great advice to give for anybody. Be ready to step in for particularly those that are thinking about starting their own business or making a step away from that because it's scary. And there are scary things, and you're stepping into a zone that is not comfortable and that you're not used to. And it's filled with failure and no's and yeses, but it's also very fulfilling. So I think that's great advice to give.
Yeah.
Kelly, where can our audience find you?
Yes. Well, now I am no longer embarrassed to say 2milehighmarketing.com. Up until a couple of days ago, that website was real sparse, but now it actually does reflect what we do. So 2milehighmarketing.com is my business website. Also, LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. I would imagine, Shelby, that you will put that in the show notes because the link to my LinkedIn will be a lot easier than me trying to spell out my name, as we said at the beginning of the show. So
I will put it. I have it right now. I did that before we even got on. So yep,
perfect.
I
Great.
got it. Well, that was great. To all you listeners out there, this was a great story about how first of all, understanding what your genius is and understanding that what you have to offer is something that's unique and different. And that's a battle on its own, but when you have that clarity, turning it into a business or turning it into a revenue stream for one, but then a business for another, that's a pretty inspiring story, and you did it in a short amount of time. That doesn't mean you won't grow and do things and change things, but it's a great story to inspire our audience to do that. So
Great. Thanks
thank
for having me on, Shelby.
yeah, thank you for coming in today. And to all you potential, you all have genius in you to share with the world and make an impact and create an income stream out of it. You can live a life of your passion and be fulfilled. Kelly and I share a very similar space in that, yeah, this is hard. And yes, I have to be uncomfortable, but damn it, I'm a whole lot more fulfilled than I was in the corporate space, in academia, because I get to do it myself. And there's no reason that you can't do it too. So reach out to Kelly if you need some help with your marketing. And always happy to talk about how to turn your genius into an income stream or two. So we'll see you next time on the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast.